Hello everyone and welcome to another News Coolum video and another plug side chat. Now, I took a trip up north to visit my family over Christmas and I posted a video of it. And along the way, I picked up a living Christmas tree. Now, this has been a long-standing family tradition for me. We always buy a live Christmas tree and then plant it after Christmas. And that got me thinking because really trees are one of the more effective means of carbon sequestration. Right now, we're seeing CO2 rates in the atmosphere doubling over pre-industrial CO2 levels. And so really as a society, we do need to be aware of the amount of greenhouse gases, and in particular things like carbon dioxide, that we are all individually contributing to the system. The trip, though, gave me an idea of doing a quick calculation, right, of how much my planting a Christmas tree really would offset that carbon impact. Typically, a tree will absorb a little less than 50 pounds of carbon dioxide in a year. The average, I think they say, is about 48 pounds. So then I cross-referenced in terms of how much CO2 is emitted just on average with the California power grid, and then compared that to the kilowatt hours used by my Bolt EV for my 500-mile trip. And the rough calculation came out to about 100 pounds of CO2 for my 500-mile trip north. And that's based on an average of about 0.66 pounds of CO2 per kilowatt hour of energy produced in California. And of course, I used, according to my reader, about 145 kilowatt hours, but I rounded that up to 150. Again, just an average. You're going to have losses with electricity and all sorts of other things that go into it. So really a good estimate, though, is my Bolt EV typically requires about 100 pounds of CO2 to make that 500-mile trip. Now, comparing that to a gasoline-powered car, well, gasoline emits about 20 pounds of CO2 per every gallon. So even a really efficient car, say a Prius or whatever, getting 50 miles to the gallon on that trip, it would burn through 10 gallons of gasoline. That 10 gallons of gasoline equals, well, about 200 pounds of CO2. So given California's power grid, my Bolt EV literally emits half as much CO2 as the most efficient gasoline-powered vehicle. And again, that doesn't necessarily account for the CO2 emitted to get that fuel to the fueling stations, process it, break it out of crude, all of those other things that go into just getting the fuel there. But just from the pump or the wall to the wheels, if you will, the Bolt EV is emitting about half as much CO2 as basically the gold standard for gasoline-powered vehicles. But really what that means in context of, say, planting a living tree is that in 2 years, that tree that I planted will have offset that trip completely. And it also gives a way, say, of calculating for every 500-mile trip I make up and every 500-mile trip I make back down, I should have planted a total of about 4 trees. Now, our property up north has way more trees than that, and we're planning on planting even more. But this gives you an opportunity, right, to say, calculate for yourself how many trees you would need to plant in order to offset just your transportation needs. So if every tree, right, on average absorbs about 48 pounds of CO2 a year, we could just round it up to 50. And every gallon of gasoline produces, rounded up, about 20 pounds of CO2. And that means that if you're still using gasoline, maybe a plug-in hybrid or a secondary vehicle or whatever, you can just look at your gasoline consumption over the course of the year and calculate how many trees you would need to plant just to offset your transportation needs. And because every tree absorbs on average, just round up, say about 50 pounds of carbon dioxide per year, and each gallon of gasoline you burn releases, rounded up, about 20 pounds of CO2, then you can estimate based on that for every 2.5 gallons of gasoline you burn, you should have at least one tree planted. That means that if you burn 25 gallons of gasoline in a year, that seems like a lot, you would need to have 10 trees planted. And if you burn 250 gallons of gasoline in a year, you would need to have 100 trees planted just to offset the carbon that's being emitted from your tailpipe, essentially, for your transportation needs. So I think this is a good, interesting way of saying, how can we, in a healthy way, offset some of the carbon dioxide that we're, putting into the air. For my family, part of the reason, we get living Christmas trees is my mother's a gardener and she loves gardening. And so, the Christmas tree itself is a gift that keeps on giving. It provides shade, it provides cover, it's landscaping. But, not everybody has the room to plant a tree like that. But there are places you can donate money and they'll plant trees on your behalf, or they'll reforest areas on your behalf. So you're funding them for doing that. So that could also be an opportunity for you if you want to offset the amount of carbon emissions. But for us EV owners, I think it's also an important realization that our electric vehicles aren't all that clean either. I mean, 100 pounds of CO2 for a trip up north, for a 500-mile trip, well, most people wouldn't think that that's a huge impact, but it's 100 pounds of CO2. And, there was a recent article and study done of California where at this point the power grid is releasing about half as much CO2 as personal transportation, but that's still a lot. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways in which we can do things to offset. And so for me, I'll have to go back and do some calculations, based on the amount of CO2 that I'm responsible for my transportation in the Bolt EV. Really, how many trees do I have, and how many trees should I have planted to offset that carbon that I'm emitting? And who knows, maybe actually go carbon negative. It could happen. But I think it's a good way to just sort of assess our own personal impacts and put some definite numbers on what we personally are responsible for. I'd love to hear what you think about this. Do you just chop down a tree for Christmas? Do you actually get living Christmas trees? Do you plant trees? Do you donate to have trees planted? How much gasoline are you still burning per year? Have you actually tallied it up? And then maybe how many pounds of CO2 you're personally responsible for releasing into the atmosphere, say just for transportation. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel, and thank you for watching.